Today we're going to be building some infrastructure in Mythos, which basically means we're going to be building 2 bridges, 2 gatehouses. One of those gatehouses is an actual historical gatehouse from Bordeaux, France. And I also built some houses, although I forgot to record them, so they will just pop up. Anyways, before we actually get started with the video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more. There's also channel memberships if you want early access to videos. Now let the chaos begin. I should probably also start this video by saying Happy New Year's. So I did say, oh, I'm not going to stop building. I'm not going to have a break during the holidays. I'm just going to continue on. And then I didn't upload for 2 weeks. So in essence, I did have a break, but also not. Because you see what the problem is? I did not stop building. That's the problem. I just did not stop. And usually with builds, I have like a nice clean end point where it's like this build is finished. Now twice in a row now, actually probably 3 times, I've just never felt like there was like a clean end point. So I just continued building and then the videos got delayed, and that's exactly what happened here. Even though it's not as long as the last video, but that's because at the end, after I built the historical gatehouse, it was just like, yeah, the next buildings are not going to be that interesting, so I'm not going to record them. Even though the last building that I built is literally inspired by the Louvre. Like the Louvre in Paris, like the palace. Yeah, present poison or voiceover poison is kicking past poison in the ass. Because that would have been a really nice building to show being built. But I did not record it because I thought like, oh yeah, that's just... you know, it's not going to be that important. Buildings next to the gatehouse are just, you know, they're just going to be there to make the thumbnail look pretty. And then I built a fucking palace. Yeah, again, I did not stop building, and that was the problem. That's why I just, like, first I started building the canal walls because I was sick of the floating pods. So I built canal pods, and then it was just like, oh yeah, you know what else is floating? The train tracks, because ever since the second episode, or I think it was the second episode where we built the train station, then the train tracks coming out of the station were just floating. So it was just like, oh yeah, I need to build a gate or like something to hold those train tracks. And because it's in a city, I got inspired by like the trains in New York. I think they still kind of look like this, or at least like the train bridges look like this. So I was building that, and then it was just like, oh yeah, but now that I've built like a bridge for the train so that it doesn't float, now there's still some parts that are floating, you know, the ones that are going over the water. So now I can't put off building those bridges either, because it's going to annoy me. And I built those bridges, and the first one actually needed a gateway or just like a different section along the bridge, because that bridge at the end actually rises up a little bit, and to kind of mesh that together into the bridge would kind of look weird. So it was just like, alright, this bridge is basically 2 sections, most of the bridge, and then you have this small section where the elevation changes. So I built a triumphant arch, I think is what it's called, but probably not, because the word just sounds really wrong in my head. Basically, think of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, but then something slightly different, because I wasn't inspired by the Arc de Triomphe. I was just looking at triumphant arches like that. It doesn't sound like a real word. I was going to, for some reason my brain just wants to say it doesn't sound like a real world. I mean, Mythos is not supposed to be a real world, but brain is apparently having a seizure, I think. I mean, that's pretty much standard for my videos, that halfway through or somewhere along the path, my brain just gives up. But anyways, so I built like this arch for the bridge. Then I built the other bridge. That doesn't look like the first bridge at all, because by the time that I was building the second bridge, I was looking at a lot of Bloodborne playthroughs. Like TV Science, where he also does like the boss analysis, because for man, that voice. But I was looking at a lot of Bloodborne videos, so I got inspired by that, so it's going to look a little bit more gothic. Anyways, build that bridge. And then I was just like, oh yeah, but now I have like the trains, and suddenly just the bridge stops because it's not going to be on this steel bridge forever. So the bridge just stops. Alright, that's not going to look good in a thumbnail, and I don't want to just have one bridge in a thumbnail. I just want a lot of stuff in a thumbnail, because then you click on it and numbers and everything. So then I was just like, alright, I need a nice clean breakpoint for the train tracks. Like a nice point where the trains sort of go into the background. Now, the problem here was the trains going into the background, or at least leaving the main street area, meant that they are going through buildings, because the main street is supposed to give you this illusion of it being an actual city. So it's going to go through buildings. How am I going to make that work? So the first idea was literally just to build a house with an archway in it so that the train goes through. And then it was just like, no, let's build a gatehouse, because that's going to not make the video that much more delayed. No, not at all. I think you can sense the sarcasm. I think it's also just dripping everywhere. I need to have a mop now to clean up all of the sarcasm. But then I was just like, alright, a nice gatehouse. It's not going to take that long. Past Poison, that fucker, found an historical gatehouse in Bordeaux where it was just like, how am I going to build this? We're going to build this because this is my hyperfixation now. I hoped that the hyperfixation would end there after I finished that gatehouse. Spoiler alert, it did not, because then the gatehouse just looked lonely. And it wouldn't look good in a thumbnail, so... Also, for my sense of peace, I was just like, alright, we're going to just build some bare walls along the sides just to kind of give an idea of where the buildings or the rest of the facades are going to be. And then it was just like, yeah, but this doesn't look pretty. So then I built actual facades. And I thought like, alright, I'm not going to record these because it's just going to be some facades. Not important. The bridges, the canal walls, the actual infrastructure and the gatehouses, those are the important bits. And then I built the palace of the fucking Louvre as a facade. Does it kind of stand out? Yes, but I mean, the main street is supposed to be kind of an eclectic bunch of a lot of just in-your-face buildings. Again, would have really liked to have actually recorded the final facade that I built, but it did not. Now, don't worry. The next video is just going to be all facades. Not the facades that you will see pop up in the cinematics of this video, but the next video is just going to be all facades because I really want to get ahead with the main street and just... It's not that I've gone bored of the main street, but I have so many ideas for rides, but my brain is not happy leaving the main street as it is. I want to be able to just look at the main street and think, yes, this is finished, or as finished as it will be for now, because there's one ride that I really don't know how to incorporate yet, so maybe the main street's not going to be finished for a bit, but I just don't want to leave the main street unfinished to an extent. But I need to build a lot of facades. I think the final count was that I still need to build like 16 facades. Am I going to build 16 facades in the next video? I don't know. I already finished one. Yeah, you heard that correctly. I didn't say like, oh, I built 6 or anything. No, I built one. One facade. I didn't even build interiors yet, even though two of the facades that will pop up in the cinematics in this video actually have sort of workable interiors. With that, I mean, the doors can open and there's glass so you can look inside. So when we get there, I will start building interiors. But just for building all of the facades, I first built the facades and then later we will probably have a dedicated video to the interiors. But yeah, so next video is just going to be building a lot of facades. This video is just Poison can't stop building. And it's an issue. I mean, it's happened 3 times in a row now. The parking lot and the main street, I just couldn't stop building. because there was just, in my head, I always think like, oh yeah, there's always like a nice clean ending point. No, there's not. Why am I lying to myself? The ending point is poison. Your video is going to be 60 minutes long. Your voice is not going to hold out for that long. So the ending spot is this building, because otherwise the video is going to go over 40 minutes. Looking at the timing of this video, I think it's also going over 40 minutes. Anyway, so building the bridges now. I've already I need to actually get into what we're building and not just complaining about how much I built. But now we're building the first bridge. So this is the bridge that has the elevation change at the end. And this bridge is a pretty standard classical bridge, I would say. I think they have these in Paris, but they also have these in Rome and such. It's just a very classical style bridge. Now I did make the arches a little bit more pointy, because at this point I started watching a lot of Bloodborne, and that's like a lot of the building that I do is not only inspired by like, oh yeah, this is the theme of the area. It's also just like, what is Poison watching at that point? So at this point I was watching a lot of Bloodborne playthroughs by TB Skyen, because man, that voice, and also I really like it, the boss design talks. It's weirdly soothing, but also just interesting in a way. But because of it, I was watching a lot of Bloodborne. So there's going to be a bit more gothic inspiration in the bridges. Because Bloodborne is like, I think, like Victorian England inspired, but then make it creepy. So gothic, Victorian architecture styles. But then basically give it a palette swap or a color swap, and then it kind of works in Mythos. But that's also the thing with like, I am inspired by what I am consuming at that moment. Not just food, but also other stuff. I was eating ice cream when I made the Louvre building, which is probably going to be a ice cream shop, but with that, I just mean, oh yeah, all of the videos that I'm watching at that point. So the bridges were like slightly gothic inspired, because I was watching Bloodborne at the time. And then there's also the Etrurian area and the Arabian area. Why did I want to build those? Because I just want to build medieval and Arabian stuff. And somebody actually commented in one of the videos, again, while building, I was just in a black hole, and I just saw comments come and go. I was just like, I need to continue building. So sorry to the person commenting. I forgot what your name was, but I did remember that the essence of your comment was, as far as I remember, of like, why are you building a Turian and stuff when the name of the park is like Mythos, and so it's going to be like mythology and such, and mythology ends 1,000 years ago, longer, but I'm very bad with numbers. Don't know how. Here's the thing with history lessons, I did not have to remember numbers. And that's great, because I was horrible at that. There was only like a handful of like dates that I had to remember because they were really important, but I never had to remember dates when it came to history. So it was just never like snapped into my brain of like, remember numbers. You look that stuff up. But I'm a dumbass, so before I started doing this voiceover, I did not remember to look up the numbers. So, sorry. But basically just like Arthurian stuff doesn't really fit in with so I don't know why I have such trouble saying mythology and mythological stuff. So maybe you should do another team or something like that. And the thing that, well, first of all, Mythos is not going to be just all myths. For some reason, I want to just keep saying mythological, which is not a word, but my brain is just having a complete seizure. But Mythos is not going to be all about mythology. it's also going to be about like folktales, legends, and such. And so that's also why I was able to sneak in the Arabian area. And at the base level, it's just I want to build medieval stuff, I want to build Arabian stuff. And that's basically the reason. And so I was just like, oh yeah, I want to build medieval stuff. And so that's why I wanted a Turian area. So there was a point to what I was trying to say here. Oh yeah, so a lot of the stuff that I'm building, a lot of the stuff that I'm planning is pretty much just based on what do I want to build, what am I consuming at that time, and then I will try to make it work afterwards. So if in the case of like these bridges, yes, I was inspired by Bloodborne. Does it really work with the theme of the main street, which is like this Parisian 1800s Second Empire style? No, because Gothic wasn't really the style back then. But you know, with some color swapping and like a palette change and such, it kind of works. And maybe also add a little bit of like more dimension to the build, because you have like things of different ages. And it's also how like the older gatehouse that I built for the train station kind of works, because it adds that sense of realism of just like, oh yeah, buildings are not going to all get destroyed as soon as a new style of architecture becomes popular. Then we wouldn't have all of these churches and castles across Europe, because a lot of buildings were just, you know, kept the way it is because they were functional, and also because they were important for a whole load of other reasons. So that was like, oh yeah, that's the justification that I can use for building this gatehouse. But in the moment, it was literally just, I want to build this gatehouse because hyperfixation says so. And so that's also the way of like, oh yeah, that's why we're going to eventually build an Turian area. That's also why we eventually are going to build a Arabian area. And it's because I want to build it, and how those areas are going to look is probably going to be based mostly on what I am consuming at that point, although I will try and stick to a theme. Like with the, let's say, the Greek area, you will not suddenly see Roman stuff. Like, I know boundaries, and I can't justify Roman stuff in a Greek area. Or like, well, actually a difficult one is actually trying to figure out like, or make sure that I'm not building like Chinese style buildings in the Japanese area. I am actually doing my research of like, alright, what are the detailed differences there? Because I don't want to build the area and then later on realize, oh, this is more inspired by Chinese architecture and not Japanese. So I'm doing my research there. It's just that a lot of the research is very vague there. I'm literally looking up like research documents on like what are all of the details, what are all the differences, just to make sure that I'm not incorrectly showing like, oh yeah, this is the Japanese area, and then it's just like, this is completely Chinese. There. Anyway, so it's also the reason why I think I'm now mixing topics, but I think most people expect that at this point. But going back to like, oh yeah, the reason that the Turian area is there is just because I want to build medieval stuff. It's also the reason why there's no Egyptian area, because I did not want to build Egyptian buildings. Now, here's the thing, it's just because I'm not that interested in Egyptian mythology. Not saying that Egyptian mythology isn't cool, it's just not kind of my cup of tea. I'm just like, I really like Greek mythology. I'm slightly getting more into Japanese and Norse mythology, and Aztec stuff is just kind of cool. Mythology I will get into later, but this is not saying, oh, Mythos is going to have an Aztec area. It's just, if there's space left, there might be. But there's probably not ever going to be an Egyptian area, because I just don't want to build Egyptian stuff. That's the whole reason. Anyway, so yeah, basically just to sum it all up, the Arthurian area doesn't really fit, well, Arthurian and the Arabian area don't really fit with like the mythological aspect of Mythos, but it does kind of fit with like the folktale, legends and myths kind of stuff that Mythos is also supposed to be. Because Mythos is just not all mythological stuff is basically what I'm saying. It's also folk legends and such, and also it's mostly based on what I want to build at that moment. And at that moment, or at this moment, it was an arch. The next moment, it's just a full-on gothic bridge. I also wanted to make like one of those pillars. Like the big triumphant columns. Again, that doesn't sound like a correct word. It probably isn't. But I wanted to build one of those just because it would be a nice thing to have in the main street. And I will choose pretty over functional. Anyway, so yeah, basically just building this as like a nice little way to sort of shield the elevation change in the bridge. And then also just because I thought like, oh yeah, the left or the right side of the main street, because we have the main part of the main street and the right part, sort of a side part. That's going to be like the upper town, so all of the buildings there are going to be a little bit prettier. It's also why I got inspired by the Louvre for one of the buildings. I am never going to forgive Past Poison for not recording that build, because it's pretty. Anyway, so now we're building the second bridge, which is pretty much just more of a gothic bridge. I literally looked up gothic bridge for this one. And it's just like, I want a bridge that is a lot more open than the last one. And then I saw one bridge which was just a big arch that then had a lot of smaller arches. And here's the fun thing. I did not save that bridge and I went to sleep because a lot of the building I do a little bit later, because for some reason Tired Poison is really efficient at building. Wake Poison, like 3 p.m. Poison, is just like la-di-la-di-la, I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this and blah. If I'm slightly tired, then it's just like work modes. I also just really loudly slammed my desk. I hope that's audible, because that actually would be kind of adding something to the actual voiceover. But a lot of the times, anything of sound that happens around me doesn't actually get recorded, or actually isn't audible. If that like is audible, then put a thumbs up in the comments. Because I know that even while editing, like even while cutting down like the voiceover and such, I'm probably not going to find it anymore, because the voiceover is 40 minutes. I think actually more. I think it was 42, but I don't know what the end result of this video is going to be. Voiceover Poison never really knows what the video is going to be. However, editing Poison usually also doesn't. It's like there's 3 separate beings here. There's building Poison, the la-di-la-di-la one. There's voiceover Poison, who really usually shits on editing Poison. And then there's editing Poison, who is just... I like editing, it's just... there's a lot of crap. Anyways, back to the actual builds. What was I actually going to talk about? My brain was just like having a complete aneurysm there. Because I had like a topic lined up and I probably already started talking about it, but then my brain just went Windows boot up sound and just, well, boot down sound. Yeah, now I've just completely lost track of the English language, but at this time point, that's kind of expected. It's actually kind of a miracle that it didn't happen sooner. But anyway, so as I said, this bridge is basically just completely gothic. And, well, it's completely gothic, but then with the color swatch and everything and a little bit of like accessorizing, it still fits in and it's pretty. I really like this bridge. I just like the arches and the arches within the arches. I just like round curves. Both in real life and in buildings. That's probably too much information, but let's just say I really like this bridge. Actually, even more so compared to the last one, even though I'm still really proud of the last bridge, but it's just there's something about this bridge that really works well, even though it's really not supposed to work. Like, this is not like a Second Empire style bridge. This is something that you would maybe see in Victorian England when the Gothic style really came back into fashion. Because yes, buildings or architecture also has like trends and such. So there was a time where like Gothic building or Gothic architecture came back into style, and this just feels like a bridge that would really work well in that like Gothic Victorian style, but with the color swatch and everything, it still really works well in Mythos as well. And trying to figure out why it works, I always just thought like, oh, because it's like kind of airy, it has that kind of fantastical vibe, so it works well in Mythos because it's kind of the same. First of all, it's the same color palette, which works really well. That's one of the great tips that I could give you when it comes to building and you want an area to kind of feel like it's one area. Just use the same color palette. You can kind of switch in colors, have like some pop out colors. Like one of the buildings in the main street has like a red facade, which is supposed to draw attention because it breaks with the rest of the color palette. But then the majority of the building itself is still the same color palette. So it stands out, but it doesn't break the immersion. And that's also when you're like building shops and such, and you want them to fit in with the area, but also want them to be like in your face. You want those buildings to draw attention. Use like a breakaway color in one piece of the building. So with that building in the facade, it's just a red ground floor. Like, I wanted to say blood red, but it's probably not. YouTube is probably not going to like me saying blood red. Burgundy is I think red. It's maroon red? I don't know. Yeah, burgundy is red. I think. Yes, it is. I think so. Anyways, I also wanted to build a fountain because what city like Mythos is not just going to have a fancy fountain? I however didn't build that in the end because I got distracted by facades. I'm just going to blame everything on the facades now. Like, every problem in the world is because I started building facades. You're on fire? It's because I built facades. Oh, you came too late and now the train is going away from the train station without you? Yeah, it's because I built facades. It's just, you can blame it all on me building facades. Oh, you're sick now? Yeah, it's because I built facades. Also, I think with every time that I said facades, the pronunciation changed. It's because it's late. I wanted, again, 3 p.m. Poison is just like la-di-la-di-la, I'm going to do this, going to do that, even though I should be doing the voiceover then because I'm the most mentally awake. But I just decided, no, we're going to continue building. Again, there you see the underlying problem. I just don't know how to stop building. But I continue building. I've already one facade done of the next video, even though I still have 15 more to go. And that's not even counting the restaurant. Now, I'm going to talk more about that later, but that's the reason why I didn't build a fountain, is the reason why I didn't build that column, victory or triumphant column? Victory column? I don't know what it is. Just a decorative column. Like the big ones. With usually the statue on top. This is the main issue that I have now with Planet Coaster. I don't have enough statues. I can make them with basic shapes, but they wouldn't really look pretty because I want marble statues and the basic shapes look really plasticky. That's my main problem with Planet Coaster 2. And no, it isn't. It's because the game was released way too early. Now I'm going to talk more about the restaurant-y thing later, but I first want to get onto the thing of... Yes, Planet Coaster 2 I think was definitely released way too early. Like, if Planet Coaster 2 was released not now, but like in March or maybe like halfway through this year, I think there would have been a lot less issues. Now you can say that about any game, but it just feels like with the issues that we are having, or at least that you guys are having, because I'm privileged that I have not encountered any like really significant bugs, except for the one about the trash cans and benches where I couldn't duplicate them because it would crash my game. But I'm privileged that I didn't have any issues, or at least any major ones. I just had like annoyances. But with the issues that we were having, it really feels like the kinds of issues that would be solved if the game just had a little bit more development time. Now, here's the thing. I have seen like similar sentiments in the community. The one thing that I'm a bit annoyed about is people saying like, oh, it's because of the devs and the devs didn't want to do this, or the devs just wanted money. The devs are the meat shields. Because the devs, like, what I'm trying to say is the devs are the meat shield behind which management and like the CEOs and the shareholders can hide. The devs probably would have wanted to delay the game, or at least have it released in a state that was better than what we got. It's probably the shareholders and management that were saying like, no, we need our money now. So we're going to release this game, even though it probably shouldn't be released because it's not completely finished yet. But they wanted their money probably. So what I'm trying to say is, please don't go around saying like, oh, it's the devs' fault, or it's like... I also saw something about the devs being way too silent now, and I don't know how to address that properly. But then I don't know how much space like the community managers are given, how much like time those people are given and funds and such, because they also need their salaries paid. And if management isn't allowing them the freedom to really interact with the community, then there's that. But yeah, please don't go and attack the devs, because I'm 95% sure that the devs had no say in when Planet Coaster 2 was going to get released. And I'm sure the devs now want to solve all of the issues. It's just the management. Or maybe not even management, really just shareholders. The people doing all of the financial stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much my message, is just don't attack the devs. And if you are talking to the devs, please keep it constructive. Anyways, that's it. That's enough complaining. Let's move on to restaurant. While we're building the historical gate, that's actually a real building in Bordeaux, France. Although I changed it slightly because, of course, there's not a train going through that gate in real life. I just changed it, and I really thought like, oh, well, I really thought I want to build this gate. I saw the gate and I was just like, I need this. Like, even though it doesn't really fit, I need this. And the story that I went with justifying why this gate would work is because it added a sense of history to Mythos. And that helps sell the immersion of like, oh, this is an actual city. Because in an actual city, you usually have historical buildings. It's like churches, maybe a castle, or palaces, or like official buildings that have been constructed years ago. Unless you're like the States, where a lot of the things are not older than 200 years. But in Europe, a lot of things are really old. Unless they burned down or got bombed in wars. Then they're usually not that old. But I was just like, I want to build this gate. And it actually kind of works with the immersion because it makes it feel like a living, breathing city. So you then have like historical buildings. So that's basically my entire reasoning for why am I building a probably medieval style gatehouse. It's because historically it makes, or story-wise, it makes sense. If you want to really sell that immersion. Would this be in an actual theme park? Probably not, unless it was like the weenie of a coaster. Here it's just another building in the main street. But that's because Mythos is extra like that. And it's because the builder of Mythos couldn't contain himself while building. But anyways, I did want to say like, oh, I'm also going to be building a restaurant. Now, it's not really going to be a restaurant, it's going to be a food court because we don't have restaurants. It's another thing that I feel like if the game was released later, we might have had that in the base game. And I really hope that's not... I mean, it's probably not going to be DLC, but I hope that it's not going to be DLC. I really hope that that's just going to be a free update. Just kind of like the park bench, not the park benches, the park tables that we got with Planet Coaster 1. Those are base game in Planet Coaster 2, but the restaurants aren't. Although I still had some issues with the restaurants in Planet Zoo, because the guests just teleported to the tables, but then in the end that actually worked in my favor, because then I could make the restaurants different levels as such and not have to worry about potting. So, a good thing and a bad thing. Yeah, by this point I've completely lost all track of what we were talking about. I was just like, oh yeah, we're going to need to build a restaurant. Because the right side of the main street is all food stuff. There's not going to be any like souvenir shops there. Because a lot of the people walk on the right. This is actually like from some kind of, I think, podcast or like a documentary on like how Disney was built, but like a lot of the food stuff is on the right. Or yeah, it's on the right because people like to walk on the right side. And then when you leave the park, all of the souvenir shops and such are on your right. So that was kind of the idea here as well, of like all of the food stuff is on the right side, it's off the main part, and all of the souvenirs just are on the main part, so that when you walk out of the park and when you're more likely to buy a souvenir, so that you don't have to haul it all along during your entire trip or stay at the park, then it kind of works. Because then all of the souvenirs are on your right side. Does that make any sense? Probably not with the way that I am describing it. It makes sense in my head, but then that's the main issue. And also the reason why I don't really do tutorials. Things make sense in my head. But I have to really plan out a script to make it make sense just for everyone. And I don't really like scripts because then I just like my brand of chaos. And that doesn't really work well with a script. So that's also the reason why I'm like, oh yeah, I really want to do tutorials, but I'm also shit at them, so you will leave more confused than when you started the tutorial. But yeah, so basically the entire idea was just like, have all of the food stuff on the right when you enter the park, and when you exit the park, then everything on the right is souvenir shops and such, so that when you are most likely to buy a souvenir, they're on the right. Because people like to walk on the right side of the path. So when you enter, on the right side of the pot is food and everything. And when you exit, on the right side of the pot is all of the souvenirs and such. Now, when it came to building the actual, like just the last bits for the actual gatehouse, it's missing statues, because the only statue that could really work here is like the Athena statue. But I've used that Athena statue everywhere now. And again, I really want more statues. I want like busts and angels. Actually, I could probably turn the Athena statue into an angel, but it's just, I need more statues. Anyways, that's going to be it for today's video. As I said, there's going to be 4 houses just popping up in the cinematics because I didn't record them. Anyways, again, that's it for this video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button if you want to see more. Or actually the like and subscribe button if you want to see more. Can you tell that my brain is just completely fried at this point? Probably yes. Now there's also channel memberships if you want early access to videos and emojis. And that's going to be it. Hope all of you have a wonderful day, guys. Bye bye.